2 pink lines. One forgotten night. A secret that will destroy everything. Elena Rivera's hands wouldn't stop shaking. The pregnancy test. 2 pink lines. Sat in the trash like evidence of a crime. She was pregnant. With his baby. Adrian Blackwood. Her billionaire boss. The man who'd held her like she was his entire world 8 weeks ago. And then forgot her name by morning. Now she's invisible again. A maid making $12 an hour in a $50 million penthouse. Carrying the child of a man who will never remember the night that changed everything. She has a choice. Tell him and risk everything. Or disappear forever. But in his world, secrets never stay buried. This is a story about forbidden love, devastating secrets, and a second chance that shouldn't exist. If you're ready to feel everything, subscribe now. This is the Heartless Billionaire and the Pregnant Maid. Let's begin. The pregnancy test clattered into the metal trash bin with a sound that felt too loud for the silence of the staff quarter. 2 pink lines. Elena Rivera stared at the white plastic stick like it might change its answer if she looked hard enough. It didn't. The lines remained, stark and certain, mocking the careful life she'd built in the shadows of Adrian Blackwood's world. Her hands trembled as she sat on the edge of the narrow cot that served as her bed. The room was barely 10 feet wide, a converted storage space with a single window that overlooked the alley behind the building. Gray morning light filtered through the glass, cold and unforgiving. Outside, Manhattan was waking up. Car horns, distant sirens, the hiss of steam from a street vent. Inside, Elena's world was collapsing. 8 weeks ago, the charity gala. The night she should have stayed invisible. She closed her eyes, and the memory returned in fragments. Adrian's father had died 3 days before the event. Everyone expected him to cancel. He didn't. He showed up in a black suit that fit him like armor, his jaw tight, his eyes empty. Elena had been assigned to the coat check, a shadow among shadows. But then she'd found him alone in the library, a glass of whiskey in his hand and grief carved into every line of his face. "You don't have to pretend you're fine," she'd whispered. He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time in 2 years, she wasn't invisible. What happened next was a blur of his hands in her hair, her name on his lips, and the desperate way he'd held her like she was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. It was reckless, stupid, beautiful, and then it was over. The next morning, he'd walked past her in the hallway without a flicker of recognition. His walls were rebuilt. His grief was locked away. She was invisible again. Elena opened her eyes and forced herself to breathe. The nausea was constant now, a low simmer in her stomach that spiked every time she smelled coffee or saw his face. She'd been hiding it for weeks, taking breaks in the staff bathroom, keeping saltines in her apron, and avoiding him whenever possible. But this couldn't be hidden forever. She stood and walked to the small mirror bolted above the sink. Her reflection looked pale, dark circles shadowing her eyes. She barely recognized herself. 2 years of saving every penny, of working double shifts, of dreaming about college or a little apartment with a real kitchen, all of it felt impossibly far away now. The penthouse above her head was worth $50 million. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows. Art that cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime. Adrian Blackwood lived in a world of private jets and board meetings and women who wore diamonds like they were nothing. Elena made $12 an hour, and now she was carrying his child. A sharp knock on the door made her jump. "Rivera! Mr. Blackwood needs the east wing cleaned before his 8 o'clock call." The head housekeeper's voice was sharp and impatient. Elena swallowed hard. "Coming!" She shoved the pregnancy test deeper into the trash and pulled on her uniform, a plain black dress with a white apron, professional, forgettable, exactly what she needed to be. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt like ascending into another universe. The doors opened to reveal gleaming floors and the scent of expensive cologne. Adrian's world, cold, controlled, perfect. She found him in his office, standing by the window with his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was clipped and authoritative. A deal worth millions, probably. He didn't turn when she entered. Elena moved quietly, dusting the shelves and straightening the books he never read. Her stomach churned. She focused on her breathing. In, out. Don't think about him. Don't think about that night. Elena. Her name on his lips froze her in place. She turned slowly. He was watching her now, his gray eyes unreadable. He looked like he always did. Impeccable suit, perfectly styled dark hair, the kind of handsome that belonged on magazine covers. Untouchable. Yes, Mr. Blackwood? You look tired. Are you ill? The concern in his voice was professional and detached. The same tone he'd used to ask about a malfunctioning appliance. I'm fine, sir. He studied her for a moment longer, then turned back to his computer. Dismissed. Invisible again. Elena finished her work in silence and escaped to the hallway. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them against the cool wall and fought back tears. She couldn't tell him. He didn't remember. He didn't care. And even if he did, what then? She'd seen the women he dated. Models, heiresses, women who belonged in his world. She didn't. That evening, back in her cramped room, Elena pulled out the small notebook where she tracked her savings. $3,000. Not nearly enough for a baby, but it was a start. She placed a hand on her still flat stomach and whispered, "He'll never know. And that's safer for both of us." The city hummed beyond her window. Somewhere above, Adrian Blackwood sat in his empire of glass and steel, alone. And Elena made a promise to the life growing inside her. They would survive this. Together. Even if it broke her heart. The office smelled like leather and expensive scotch. Elena moved through the space like a ghost, polishing surfaces that were already spotless. It was past 9 in the evening. Overtime she couldn't afford to refuse. Her body ached. The nausea had evolved into a constant companion, sharp and unforgiving. Adrian sat at his mahogany desk, fingers flying across his laptop keyboard. He hadn't acknowledged her presence in 20 minutes. That was normal, preferred even. But tonight, the silence felt heavier. She reached for the bookshelf, stretching to dust the top row, and the room tilted. Just slightly. Just enough. Elena gripped the edge of the shelf, blinking hard against the spots dancing in her vision. "You missed a spot." His voice cut through the fog. She turned too quickly, and the world swayed again. "Sorry, Mr. Blackwood. Are you even paying attention?" The sharpness in his tone made her flinch. He was standing now, arms crossed, his gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She'd seen him angry before, at incompetent assistants, at failed deals, but this felt different. Personal. I'm sorry, you've been distracted all week. If you can't handle the job, I'll find someone who can. The words hit like a slap. Elena's throat tightened. She couldn't lose this job. Not now. Not with a baby coming and nowhere else to go. "It won't happen again, sir." She turned back to the bookshelf, forcing her trembling hands to steady. "Just finish. Just get through this." But the room was spinning now, really spinning, and her knees buckled. She didn't hit the floor. Strong hands caught her arms, holding her upright. His cologne hit her first. Expensive, familiar, the same scent that had clung to her hair for days after that night. She was too close. Close enough to remember exactly how his voice had sounded when he'd whispered her name like a prayer, before erasing her completely. "When did you last eat?" His voice was different now, quieter, almost concerned. Elena forced herself to meet his eyes. Mistake. He was watching her like she was a puzzle he needed to solve, his jaw tight, a crease forming between his brows. "I ate. I'm fine. Just stood up too fast. You're pale." "I'm fine," she repeated, pulling away from his grip. The loss of his touch felt like cold water. She steadied herself against the bookshelf. "May I finish?" He didn't answer immediately, just studied her with that unreadable expression, like he was seeing something he didn't understand. Finally, he stepped back. "Go home. You're no use to me like this." It wasn't kindness, it was efficient. She nodded and gathered her supplies, desperate to escape before he saw too much. But as she reached the door, his phone buzzed. He answered without looking away from her. "What is it, Marcus?" His assistant's voice was tinny through the speaker, loud enough for Elena to hear. Sir, just a heads up. There's some staff chatter you should know about. Apparently, one of the housekeepers might be pregnant. The quiet one, Rivera, I think? Elena's blood turned to ice. Adrian's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Something sharp and dangerous. Is that so? He said slowly. Yeah. Thought you'd want to know in case it affects her work performance. Do you want me to look into it? No. I'll handle it. He ended the call. The silence that followed was suffocating. Elena couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her hand tightened on the doorknob. Elena. She didn't turn around. Is it true? And just when Elena thought her secret was safe, one phone call changed everything. What Adrian asks next will force her to make an impossible choice. You won't believe what happens when the truth starts to surface. Stay with me. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Lie. Lie and leave and never look back. I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Blackwood. Are you pregnant? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. She forced herself to turn to meet his gaze. His face was a mask of cold composure, but his hands were clenched at his sides. That's personal, sir. Answer the question. With all due respect, my personal life is none of your concern. His expression shifted, just for a second. Not anger. Something rawer. The same look he'd had that night in the library, when he'd pulled her close like letting go would kill him. Who is he? Elena blinked. Excuse me? The father. His voice was ice. Who is he? The absurdity of it nearly broke her. He didn't remember. He truly didn't remember holding her like she was the only thing that mattered. Didn't remember the way he'd kissed her like he was drowning and she was air. There's no one, she whispered. Don't lie to me. I'm not. Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard. There's no one who matters. That was the truth, wasn't it? He didn't matter. He couldn't. Not when. He looked at her like she was just another problem to manage. Adrian's jaw worked. He turned away, facing the window, his reflection ghostly in the dark glass. I'm giving you a raise, $20 an hour, and you'll move to better quarters, 3rd floor, East Wing. Elena stared at his back. Why? I can't have my staff collapsing from exhaustion. It's bad for efficiency. Efficiency? Of course. I don't need charity, Mr. Blackwood. It's not charity. It's business. He didn't turn around. Take it or leave it. She should refuse. Should tell him to take his guilt money in. But she needed it. The baby needed it. Thank you, sir, she said quietly. Dismissed. Elena left before the tears could fall. Adrian stood alone in his office, staring at the door she'd disappeared through. Pregnant. The word churned in his mind like poison. He didn't know why it mattered. Elena Rivera was just a maid. Competent. Quiet. Unremarkable. Except she wasn't. Not really. He'd noticed things lately. The way she hummed while arranging flowers. The kindness in her voice when she spoke to the elderly doorman. The sadness that lingered in her dark eyes when she thought no one was watching. And now, pregnant, with another man's child. The thought sent an irrational surge of anger through his chest. He didn't understand it. I didn't want to understand it. She was nothing to him. So why did the image of her carrying someone else's baby feel like a knife between his ribs? Adrian poured himself a drink and downed it in one swallow. The burn did nothing to erase the question echoing in his mind. He stared at the door and muttered, "Why does the thought of her belonging to someone else bother me?" The city glittered beyond his window, and somewhere in the building below, Elena Rivera cried herself to sleep, her secret growing heavier with every breath. 2 weeks passed like a slow-burning fuse. Elena had moved into her new quarters on the 3rd floor, a room twice the size of her old one, with a window that faced the park instead of the alley. It should have felt like a gift. Instead, it felt like a cage with better lighting. Because Adrian Blackwood was everywhere now. He'd started working from home. No explanation. No warning. Just suddenly there, at the breakfast table with his laptop, in the library during her afternoon shift, on late-night calls in his office when she was supposed to be invisible. Elena told herself it meant nothing. He was a workaholic. This was his home. She was reading into coincidences. But then there were the moments that made her wonder. Like Tuesday morning, when she'd been arranging fresh peonies in the foyer. She hadn't realized she was humming an old lullaby her mother used to sing, until she turned and found him standing in the doorway, a coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. "Sorry, Mr. Blackwood. I didn't mean to disturb you." "You didn't." He'd cleared his throat and adjusted his tie. "The flowers look nice." Then he'd walked away before she could respond. Or Thursday afternoon, when she'd stopped to chat with George, the elderly doorman who'd worked in the building for 40 years. She'd brought him homemade empanadas, the only recipe she mastered on her tiny hot plate. "You're too kind, Miss Elena," George had said, his weathered face crinkling into a smile. She hadn't noticed Adrian watching from the lobby entrance until George waved at him. Their eyes had met for a fraction of a second. Something unreadable flickered across Adrian's face before he turned and disappeared into the elevator. And every morning, without fail, there was ginger tea waiting in the staff kitchen. No note, no explanation, just a steaming cup that settled her stomach enough to get through the day. Elena didn't ask, didn't dare hope it was him, but she wondered. Friday night, the penthouse hosted a dinner party. Elena worked alongside the catering staff, refilling glasses and clearing plates while Adrian entertained a group of investors. She kept her head down, her movements efficient, and practiced at being furniture. But her body had other plans. By 11, the guests were gone and the caterers had left. Elena was alone, scrubbing wine stains from the marble floor. The nausea hit like a wave, sudden, vicious, and unrelenting. She barely made it to the guest bathroom before she was sick. When it finally passed, she leaned against the cool tile wall, trembling. The clock on her phone read 1:47 a.m. She still had the living room to finish. Just a few more hours, then she could collapse. She made it back to the couch in the living room and sat down. Just for a minute, just to catch her breath. Her eyes closed. The dream was warm, safe. Someone was covering her with a blanket that smelled like cedar and winter nights. A hand, gentle, careful, brushed hair from her forehead. "You work too hard," a low voice murmured. Elena sank deeper into sleep. Morning light woke her. She jolted upright, disoriented. The living room. She'd fallen asleep on the couch. Panic spiked through her chest. How long had she been out? What if Adrian? Then she noticed the coat. It was draped over her like a blanket. Expensive charcoal wool. Italian, probably. The kind of thing that costs more than her monthly rent. Adrian's coat. Her heart stuttered. A small piece of paper was tucked into the collar. She unfolded it with shaking hands. "Rest. You're no use to me." Exhausted. Elena read the note 3 times. The handwriting was sharp and angular, businesslike, but he'd covered her, personally. Had written her a note instead of just waking her and firing her for sleeping on the job. Why? She pressed the coat to her chest. It still held his warmth. For a dangerous moment, she let herself imagine what it would be like if he cared, if he remembered, if she wasn't just a problem to manage. Then reality crashed back. He was being practical, protecting his investment. She was an employee who'd gotten a raise, nothing more. Reading into kindness was how hearts got broken. Elena folded the coat carefully and left it on his office chair with a typed thank you note. Professional, appropriate, safe. But that night, alone in her room, she pressed her hand to her stomach and whispered to the life growing inside her. "Don't get used to warmth. It never lasts." Adrian stood in the doorway of the living room at 2:15 a.m., staring at the sleeping woman on his couch. He'd heard her in the bathroom. He heard the soft, awful sounds of someone being sick. He should have left, should have gone to bed and let the staff deal with it in the morning. Instead, he'd found himself walking toward her. She looked fragile in sleep, younger than her 24 years. Her face looked younger in sleep, softer. One hand curved over her stomach, the same protective gesture he'd seen 100 times now, the one that made his ribs feel too tight. Pregnant. The words still felt like a splinter lodged beneath his skin. He didn't know why he cared. Didn't know why the thought of her carrying some faceless man's child made him want to put his fist through a wall. She was nothing to him. Except, she wasn't. He noticed things now. The way she bit her lip when she was concentrating. The softness in her voice when she spoke Spanish to the cleaning staff, the quiet dignity she carried even when she was exhausted. And he hated it. He hated the way she'd started to occupy space in his thoughts. Hated the way he found excuses to work from home just to hear her humming in the next room. This was a complication he didn't need. Adrian grabbed his coat from the closet and draped it over her carefully. His hand hovered near her face, close enough to feel the warmth of her breath, before he pulled back. "You work too hard," he murmured, knowing she couldn't hear him. He wrote the note quickly, before he could overthink it. Before he could do something stupid like stay and watch her sleep until dawn. Back in his bedroom, Adrian stood at the window and stared at the city below. She was just a staff member. This meant nothing. The raise, the better quarters, the tea, the coat, all of it was just efficiency. Maintaining a functional household. Nothing more. He repeated it like a mantra until his jaw ached from clenching. But 2 days later, when he found the coat folded on his chair with her thank you note, he pressed it to his face and breathed in the faint scent of lavender and something uniquely her. And he stood in the shadows, remembering the sight of her sleeping, and for the first time in years, Adrian Blackwood felt something. Something terrifying. Something he couldn't name. Something that felt dangerously close to longing. The storm came without warning. One moment, Manhattan was bathed in the golden glow of streetlights. Next, the sky split open with a crack of thunder so violent it rattled the penthouse windows. Elena was in the east hallway, folding fresh linens, when the lights died. Darkness swallowed everything. Her breath caught. The thunder rolled again, closer this time, a deep rumble that seemed to shake the walls. Lightning flashed, throwing grotesque shadows across the corridor. And suddenly, she wasn't in Adrian's penthouse anymore. She was 7 years old, trapped in a basement during a hurricane, water rising. Her mother was screaming, the deafening roar of wind tearing their house apart. No, 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 no. The linen slipped from her hands, her back hit the wall. She couldn't breathe. The air was too thick, too heavy. Her chest constricted like a fist was squeezing her lungs. Another crack of thunder. Elena slid down the wall, knees pulled to her chest, hands pressed over her ears. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Tears streamed down her face. Not real. It's not real. You're safe. Your lightning illuminated the hallway in a blinding flash. She screamed. Elena? The voice cut through the roar in her head. Footsteps. Quick, purposeful. Then a figure dropped to the floor beside her, and even in the darkness, she knew it was him. Elena, look at me. She couldn't open her eyes, couldn't stop shaking. I can't breathe. Yes, you can. His voice was steady, calm, an anchor in the chaos. Breathe with me. In. He inhaled deeply, loud enough for her to hear. Out. He exhaled. In. Elena tried, failed. A sob tore from her throat. Then his hand found hers in the darkness. The touch was warm, solid, real. You're safe, he said quietly. I'm right here. In, out. Follow me. She focused on his voice, his breathing. His thumb moved in slow, deliberate strokes against her knuckles. In, out, in, out. Slowly, painfully slowly, her lungs began to cooperate. The vice around her chest loosened. The room stopped spinning. Another flash of lightning. She flinched, but his grip tightened. It's just light, Adrian murmured. It can't hurt you. Listen to my voice. You're in the penthouse, 3rd floor. You're safe. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Thunder crashed overhead. Elena whimpered and instinctively pressed closer to him. She felt him stiffen for a heartbeat. Then his arm came around her shoulders, pulling her against his chest. Storms, she whispered into the darkness. I've been afraid since I was little. My mother and we almost drowned during a hurricane. I thought, you don't have to explain. But she kept talking, the words spilling out like a dam had broken. About the basement, the rising water. The way her mother had held her and sung until the rescue teams came. How her mother had died 2 years later, and storms had been unbearable ever since. Adrian didn't speak, just held her, listened. His heartbeat was steady beneath her ear. I'm pathetic, Elena breathed. You're human. Something in his tone made her look up. She couldn't see his face clearly in the dark, but she felt the weight of his gaze. Everyone's afraid of something, he said quietly. Even you? A pause. Then, yes. What scares you? The question hung between them. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Losing control, he finally said. Feeling things I can't manage. The vulnerability in those words stole her breath. Lightning flashed again, and this time she didn't flinch. She was too focused on the man holding her, the cold, unreachable billionaire who was suddenly, impossibly, human. The storm raged outside. Inside, Elena felt something shift. Some invisible wall between them is cracking. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing me. His arm tightened around her. I see you, Elena. I always have. The words settled over her like a blanket. Warmth bloomed in her chest. Dangerous, reckless warmth that she knew better than to trust. But exhaustion was pulling her under. The panic attack had drained every ounce of strength. Her eyelids grew heavy. Stay awake, Adrian said, but his voice was gentle. Trying. She lost the battle somewhere between one breath and the next. Adrian felt the exact moment Elena fell asleep against him. Her breathing evened out. Her body went soft and trusting in his arms. The storm still howled beyond the windows, but inside this dark hallway, everything was still. He should move. He should carry her back to her quarters and leave before this becomes something he can't undo. Instead, he stayed. She fit against him perfectly. Too perfect. The scent of her hair, lavender and something sweet, wrapped around him like a drug. He could feel the steady beat of her heart, the warmth of her skin through the thin fabric of her uniform. When had he memorized the exact shade of her eyes, the way her voice softened when she talked about her mother? The quiet strength she carried despite everything? This was a mistake, but his body refused to cooperate with his mind. Carefully, so carefully, Adrian shifted and lifted her into his arms. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. He carried her through the dark penthouse, guided by memory and the occasional flash of lightning. Not to her quarters, to the guest room. He laid her on the bed and covered her with a blanket. Candlelight from the hallway flickered across her face, painting her in gold and shadow. She looked younger in sleep, peaceful, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or designer clothes. Adrian sat in the chair beside the bed. He told himself he'd leave in 5 minutes, just until he was sure she was settled. 5 minutes became 10. 10 became 30. He watched the rise and fall of her chest, the way her hand rested protectively over her stomach, over the baby she was carrying, another man's baby. The jealousy that ripped through him was irrational, violent, wrong. She wasn't his, had never been his. So why did holding her feel like coming home? Dawn light crept through the windows. The storm had passed. The city was waking up, and Adrian Blackwood sat beside a sleeping woman, his world tilting on its axis. He'd built an empire in control, on logic, on keeping every emotion locked behind steel walls. But Elena Rivera, quiet, kind, and possible Elena, was dismantling those walls brick by brick without even trying. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was tender, possessive, terrifying. What are you doing to me, Elena Rivera? He whispered into the silence. She didn't answer. Something in him finally gave way, not breaking, but opening. Like a door he'd kept locked for years suddenly swinging wide. And Adrian realized, with a clarity that felt like drowning, that he was completely, irrevocably lost. He's starting to feel something he can't name or control. But will he realize what it means before it's too late? The walls are cracking, and what comes next will change everything. Keep listening. 12 weeks. Elena stared at her reflection in the staff bathroom mirror, turning sideways. The bump wasn't visible yet, not really, but her body was changing in ways she couldn't hide much longer. Her uniform felt tighter across the chest. Her face had filled out slightly, the hollows beneath her cheekbones softening. She tugged at the black dress, adjusting the apron to fall looser over her stomach. A few more weeks, maybe a month, then she'd have to tell him. The thought made her stomach twist, though whether from nausea or dread, she couldn't say. Elena. She turned from the espresso machine, surprised to find Adrian standing in the kitchen doorway. He was dressed casually, dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that made his gray eyes impossible to ignore. It was Saturday. He rarely stayed home on weekends. Mr. Blackwood. Do you need something? Coffee. He paused. With you. Elena blinked. I'm sorry? Sit with me. Have coffee. He said it like a command, but something in his expression made it feel like a question. I'm working. Take a break. This was wrong. Inappropriate. Employers didn't have coffee with their maids. They especially didn't look at them the way Adrian was looking at her now, like she was something more than furniture. But Elena found herself nodding. She poured 2 cups and followed him to the small breakfast nook overlooking Central Park. Morning light poured through the windows, turning everything gold. Adrian sat across from her, cradling his mug like he didn't quite know what to do with his hands. How are you feeling? He asked quietly. Fine, Elena. The way he said her name, patient, knowing, made her defenses crumble. Tired, she admitted, but okay. He nodded slowly, his gaze drifting to her hands wrapped around her coffee cup. You wanted to be a teacher. It wasn't a question. Elena's head snapped up. How did you? I pay attention. Heat crept up her neck. She mentioned it once, months ago, to another staff member. He'd overheard. Remembered. It was a dream, she said softly. Before my parents died. Before I had to survive instead. You could still do it. Go back to school. On $12 an hour? The bitterness in her voice surprised her. She softened it. 20 now. Thank you. But still not enough for tuition and... She stopped herself before saying a baby. Adrian's jaw tightened. What if money wasn't an issue? It's always an issue for people like me. People like you? People who weren't born into penthouse apartments. She met his eyes. People who are invisible. You're not invisible. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Elena's heart hammered. Mr. Blackwood, Adrian. His voice was rough. When it's just us, call me Adrian. This was dangerous territory. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat, to rebuild the professional walls that kept her safe. But she didn't. Adrian, she whispered, testing the shape of his name on her tongue. Something flickered in his expression. Hunger, need, something that made her breath catch. Tell me about your parents, he said, as if sensing they both needed safer ground. So she did, haltingly at first, then with growing ease. About her mother's laugh, her father's terrible jokes. The little apartment in Queens that always smelled like her mother's cooking. The hurricane that took them both when she was 19. You carry them well, Adrian said quietly. The grief. Most people let it consume them. Like you? She regretted the words immediately, but he didn't flinch. Yes. He stared into his coffee. My father was brutal. Emotionally. Sometimes physically. He built an empire by crushing everyone in his path, including his family. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm nothing like him. But the way he said it, like he was trying to convince himself, made Elena's chest ache. You're not, she said firmly. You're kind. Even when you don't want to be. Adrian's eyes snapped to hers. Kind? You leave ginger tea in the staff kitchen. You covered me with your coat. You. Her voice cracked. You sat with me during the storm when you could have left me alone in the dark. That wasn't kindness. His voice was low, strained. That was, what? He didn't answer. Just reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers where they rested on the wood. The contact was electric. Either of them moved. Neither pulled away. Elena couldn't breathe. His thumb traced a slow line across her knuckles, and every nerve in her body ignited. Elena! The doorbell rang. They both jerked back like they'd been burned. Adrian's expression shuddered instantly, walls slamming back into place. Stay here, he said curtly, already standing. But Elena followed at a distance, something cold settling in her stomach. The woman in the doorway was stunning. Tall, blonde, wrapped in a white fur coat that probably cost more than Elena would earn in 5 years. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, catching the light like captured stars. Adrian, darling! Victoria. Elena recognized her from photos in the society pages. Adrian's ex-fiancée. The daughter of a real estate mogul. The kind of woman who belonged in penthouses and charity galas. The kind of woman Adrian should be with. Victoria, what are you doing here? Is that any way to greet your future wife? She laughed, a sound like champagne bubbles, and swept past him into the foyer. Her eyes landed on Elena. Something sharp flickered across Victoria's perfect face. Assessment. Dismissal. Coffee, darling, she said without looking away from Elena. Black, 2 sugars. You remember, don't you? It took Elena a moment to realize Victoria was talking to her. Of course, Elena managed, her voice steady despite the ice spreading through her veins. Right away, ma'am. She fled to the kitchen before either of them could see her hands shaking. Adrian watched Elena disappear down the hallway, every muscle in his body coiled tight. Victoria, I've missed you. She pressed against him, her perfume cloying and overwhelming. Everything about her felt wrong now. Too cold, too practiced, not lavender and sweetness, not soft and real. We broke up 6 months ago, Adrian said flatly. A mistake. Victoria smiled up at him. I was being stubborn, but I've reconsidered. She rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his cheek. Darling, let's get married. Our families are expecting it. The merger would be no. She blinked. What? I said no. Adrian, we're not getting back together, Victoria. We never should have been together in the first place. Her expression hardened. Is this about her? She gestured toward the kitchen. The maid? Please tell me you're not throwing away our future for leave. Adrian's voice was ice. Now. In the kitchen, Elena pressed her back against the counter, Victoria's words echoing in her head. Let's get married. Of course. That made sense. Victoria was beautiful, sophisticated, and from his world. Everything Elena wasn't. The coffee in her hands blurred. She blinked hard against the burning in her eyes. Stupid. So stupid to think those moments, the coat, the storm, the coffee this morning, meant anything. She was the help. He was a billionaire, and she was carrying his baby, a secret that would destroy whatever fragile thing had been growing between them. Elena set down the coffee cup before she dropped it. Then she pressed a hand to her stomach and whispered to the life inside her, I won't let you be a mistake. No matter what happens, you'll be loved. Even if his father never knew. Even if her heart shattered into 1,000 silent pieces. Elena's heart is breaking in silence. But Adrian doesn't know the real reason Victoria's arrival destroyed her. What happens at the gala will force everything into the light. You won't want to miss this. The Plaza Hotel glittered like a jewel box. Elena stood in the staff staging area, tugging at the borrowed black dress that felt too tight across her chest, too elegant for someone like her. The other servers moved around her with practiced efficiency, but she felt out of place. Wrong. Rivera. The event coordinator's sharp voice cut through her thoughts. Mr. Blackwood specifically requested you work the main ballroom tonight. Don't embarrass us. Elena's stomach dropped. Of course he had. It had been 3 days since Victoria's visit, 3 days of Adrian's cold silence. He'd stopped working from home, stopped leaving ginger tea, stopped looking at her entirely. She'd convinced herself it was over, whatever fragile thing had existed between them. But now he'd summoned her here, to this hotel, this ballroom, the same place where, 4 months ago, she'd found him grieving, where he'd kissed her like she was oxygen, where everything had changed. Did he remember? Or was this just a cruel coincidence? Elena smoothed her dress and walked into the ballroom. Adrian saw her immediately. She moved through the crowd like a shadow, carrying a tray of champagne flutes, her dark hair swept into an elegant twist. The dress, simple, understated, somehow made her more beautiful than every diamond-draped socialite in the room. He couldn't look away. For 3 days he tried to purge her from his system, buried himself at work, avoided the penthouse. He told himself that what he felt was just inconvenient attraction, nothing more. But seeing her here, in this ballroom where something had happened, something his alcohol-soaked memory refused to fully reveal, every carefully constructed wall crumbled to dust. She was luminous, untouchable, and very clearly pregnant. The knowledge burned through him like acid. 12 weeks, maybe more. The subtle swell of her stomach was barely visible beneath the dress, but he noticed. He always noticed everything about her. Who is he? The question had haunted him for weeks. Who touched her? Who got to hold her? Who? Adrian, darling! Victoria materialized at his elbow, her hand possessive on his arm. He made the mistake of telling her about the gala, and she'd invited herself as his date. A miscalculation he now regretted. Victoria, this charity is so important, she purred, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. We should make a joint donation. Show everyone we're a united front. Adrian extracted his arm. We're not. But Victoria was already waving at a photographer. Across the room, Elena's eyes met his for a fraction of a second. Then she looked away. Marcus Chin was charming. He was also persistent. A woman as beautiful as you shouldn't be working, he said, his smile easy and warm. Let me guess, putting yourself through school? Elena managed a polite laugh. Something like that. I admire that. Determination is an attractive quality. He leaned closer. When do you finish your shift? Perhaps we could. She's working. The voice behind her was ice and razors. Elena turned to find Adrian standing there, his expression carved from stone. But his eyes were blazing. Mr. Blackwood. Marcus straightened, extending his hand. Marcus Chin. I don't believe leave. Adrian didn't even glance at the offered hand. No. Marcus blinked. I'm sorry. You're making my staff uncomfortable. Leave. Heat flooded Elena's face. Around them, conversations quieted. People were staring. Adrian, I was just... Marcus began. I won't ask again. The threat in those words was unmistakable. Marcus raised his hands in surrender and backed away, shooting Elena an apologetic look. The moment he was gone, Adrian's hand closed around her wrist. Come with me. Mr. Blackwood, I'm working, now, Elena. He pulled her through the crowd, his grip firm but not painful. People parted like water. Elena's heart hammered. This was a scene, a spectacle, everything she tried to avoid. He led her down a side hallway, away from the music and laughter, into a dimly lit corridor lined with closed doors. Empty. Private. Then he released her and stepped back, running a hand through his hair. What were you doing? His voice was tight, controlled. Barely. My job. That wasn't your job. That was... He broke off, jaw clenching. He was flirting with you. So? Adrian's laugh was sharp, humorless. So you're... He gestured at her stomach. You're pregnant, Elena. With another man's child. And you're letting some stranger... It's none of your business. It is my business. The words exploded out of him. Everything about you is my business. Elena stared at him, chest heaving. Why? Because I work for you? Because you pay my salary? Because I... He stopped. The muscle in his jaw worked. When he spoke again, his voice was raw. Who is the father, Elena? The question hung between them like a grenade. It doesn't concern you, Mr. Blackwood. Stop calling me that. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne and feel the heat radiating from his body. And don't lie to me. Who is he? Why do you care? Her voice cracked. You have Victoria. Beautiful, perfect Victoria who belongs in your world. I don't want Victoria. The words were torn from somewhere deep. I want... He cut himself off, but the confession hung in the air between them. Elena's breath caught. You want what? Adrian's eyes searched hers. He was so close now. Too close. His hand rose, hovering near her face like he wanted to touch her but didn't dare. Tell me his name, he whispered. The father. Tell me and You'll what? Tears burned her throat. You'll make him disappear? Buy him off. You can't fix this, Adrian. You can't control this. I can protect you. I don't need your protection. The words came out as a sob. I need... What? What did she need? For him to remember? For him to love her? For the impossible to be possible? Elena, let me go. She pulled away from him, her vision blurring. Please, just let me go. She ran. down the hallway, past the ballroom, through the staff exit into the cold November night. Tears streamed down her face. Her heart felt like it was tearing in two. Behind her, she heard him call her name, but she didn't stop. Adrian stood frozen in the empty hallway. Her scent lingered, lavender and something uniquely her. His hands were shaking. His chest felt hollow. I don't need your protection. But she did. She was pregnant and alone and working herself to exhaustion, and some nameless, faceless man had abandoned her, and Adrian wanted to burn the world down for it. Except, he closed his eyes. Fragments of memory flickered at the edges of his consciousness. This ballroom, 4 months ago. His father's funeral. Too much whiskey. A woman's soft voice in the darkness. You don't have to pretend you're fine. Gentle hands, dark eyes full of compassion. The scent of lavender. Elena. His eyes snapped open. No, it couldn't be. But the math aligned. 4 months, 12 weeks pregnant. And he remembered, God help him, he was starting to remember. The way she'd held him. The way he'd kissed her. The way they'd. No, he breathed. But his body knew the truth even as his mind rejected it. The baby wasn't some stranger's. It was his. And Elena, sweet, terrified Elena, had been carrying this secret alone while he demanded answers she couldn't give. Horror crashed over him in waves. What had he done? The manila envelope arrived at midnight. Adrian sat in his darkened office. The private investigator's report spread across his desk like evidence at a crime scene. Cold, clinical facts typed in neat rows. Subject: Elena Maria Rivera, age 24, employment, household staff, Blackwood residence, 2 years current status, pregnant, approximately 16 weeks estimated conception, early July known partners, none early July. His father's funeral had been on July 7th. Adrian's hands trembled as he reached for the whiskey decanter. The glass was halfway to his lips when the memory hit, sharp, vivid, undeniable. The library. Darkness. A woman's voice, soft as silk. You don't have to pretend you're fine. He'd been drowning, suffocating under the weight of grief and a lifetime of his father's cruelty. And she'd appeared like an angel, her dark eyes full of a compassion he didn't deserve. Stay with me. Please, just stay. Her hands in his hair, his mouth on hers. The desperate way they clung to each other, two broken people seeking comfort in the darkness. Her softness, her sighs, the way she'd whispered his name like a prayer. Adrian. The memory slammed into him with the force of a freight train. It wasn't some stranger. It was Elena. It had always been Elena. And the baby. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. He found her in the staff kitchen at 2 in the morning. She was making tea, her movements slow and tired. She changed out of the gala dress into worn pajamas, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. She looked impossibly young, fragile, pregnant with his child. Elena. She spun around, nearly dropping the mug. Her eyes widened when she saw his face. Whatever she read there made her take a step back. Mr. Blackwood. I didn't realize you were still awake. The baby. His voice was raw, wrecked. Is it mine? The color drained from her face. I don't know what you're don't. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides. Don't lie to me. Not anymore. July 7th. The library. My father's funeral. The air left her lungs. Tears welled in her eyes. Did you think I wouldn't remember? His voice cracked. Did you think I wouldn't figure it out? You didn't remember, she whispered. For 4 months, you looked right through me. Like I was nothing. Like that night never happened. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Answer the question, Elena. Is it mine? She flinched. Then something in her expression hardened, a quiet, devastating strength. Yes. The word hung in the air between them. Adrian felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Everything he thought he knew, everything he'd convinced himself was true, shattered in an instant. Why didn't you tell me? When? Her laugh was broken. When you walked past me the next morning like I was invisible? When you snapped at me for being distracted? When you brought Victoria back in? Her voice cracked. You didn't remember me, Adrian. That night meant nothing to you. That's not. He couldn't finish. Because she was right. He hadn't remembered. Had buried it so deep beneath grief and alcohol that it had felt like a dream. But it hadn't been a dream. It had been real. And she'd been living with the consequences alone. You hid this from me. The words came out harsher than he intended. For 16 weeks, you carried my child and said nothing. Were you ever going to tell me? Or were you just going to disappear? I was protecting us. The words exploded from her. Do you know what it's like to be me? To be the maid who got pregnant by her billionaire boss? I'd be the villain in every headline. The gold digger. The homewrecker. That's not. And you. Tears streamed down her face now. You would have hated me for trapping you. For ruining your perfect life with your perfect fiancé and your perfect world that I could never belong to. Elena, I never expected anything from you. Her voice broke on a sob. Not money. Not marriage. Not love. I was going to leave quietly and raise this baby alone because that's what people like me do. We survive. We don't ask for things we can't have. The pain in her words carved him open. But beneath it, terror clawed at his chest. A baby. His baby. He was going to be a father. Like his father. The man who turned love into violence and family into a prison. What if he became that? What if he destroyed this child the way his father had destroyed him? This changes nothing. The words came out cold, mechanical. A desperate attempt to regain control. Elena's face crumpled. What? I'll provide financial support. The best doctors. Whatever you need. His voice was ice, even as his heart screamed at him to stop. But don't expect love. I can't. I don't do that. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena stared at him like he'd struck her. Then something died in her eyes, some last fragile hope she'd been holding on to. Of course, she whispered. How foolish of me to think. She pressed a hand to her stomach, protective. Final. Thank you for the offer, Mr. Blackwood. But we don't need your money. Elena, we don't need anything from you. She turned to leave, but he caught her wrist. You can't just let me go. Her voice was empty, hollow. Please, just let me go. He should have fought harder. He should have told her the truth, that he was terrified, that he didn't know how to be a father, and that the thought of failing her and this baby paralyzed him. But the words stuck in his throat, so he let go. Elena walked to her room in a daze. She packed methodically. Clothes, toiletries, the small collection of books she'd gathered over 2 years. Everything fits into a single duffel bag. The rain started as she reached the lobby. George looked up from his newspaper, concerned about creasing his weathered face. Miss Elena? At this hour? I'm leaving, George. She tried to smile. Failed. Take care of yourself. But the rain. Let me call you a car. I need to walk. She stepped out into the downpour. The rain soaked through her jacket immediately, cold and merciless. But Elena welcomed it. Let it wash away the tears. Let it numb the ache in her chest that felt like dying. Behind her, in the penthouse high above, Adrian Blackwood stood at his window and watched her disappear into the storm. His reflection in the glass was a stranger's face. Empty. Lost. He pressed his palm against the window, a gesture as futile as it was desperate. What have I done? He whispered. But the only answer was the rain. And somewhere in the city below, Elena Rivera walked into the night, carrying his baby and her broken heart, whispering a single word into the darkness. Goodbye, Adrian. She's gone. And Adrian is left with the devastating truth of what he's destroyed. But this isn't the end. What he does next will either win her back, or lose her forever. Stay with me. Redemption is coming. 21 days. 3 weeks since Elena walked out into the rain. Adrian stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, watching the sun set over Manhattan. The city glittered like broken glass. Beautiful. Empty. Like everything else in his life. The penthouse felt cavernous now. Every room echoed with her absence. The kitchen where they'd shared coffee. The hallway where he'd held her during the storm. The couch where he'd covered her with his coat. She was everywhere and nowhere. He hadn't slept more than a few hours since she left. Couldn't work. Couldn't focus. His assistant had started fielding concerned calls from board members. His appearance at last week's investor meeting had been, in Daniel's words, a disaster. Adrian didn't care. He wandered through the penthouse like a ghost, picking up objects she'd touched, a book she'd straightened, a vase she'd filled with peonies, each one a reminder of what he'd lost, what he'd thrown away. On day 17, he found the hairpin. It had slipped beneath the couch in the living room, a simple tortoiseshell clip, nothing expensive, the kind of thing she would have bought at a drugstore with her carefully budgeted money. Adrian picked it up with shaking hands. He could see her so clearly, sitting on this couch, exhausted after a double shift, absently pulling the pin from her hair. The way the dark waves would tumble down her shoulders, the small sigh of relief. He pressed the hairpin to his chest and felt something inside him break. The sound that tore from his throat was inhuman, raw. A grief so profound it had no name. He'd destroyed her. Destroyed them. Destroyed any chance of, what? Love? Family? The things he'd spent a lifetime convincing himself he didn't deserve? Adrian slid to the floor, the hairpin clutched in his fist, and wept. His assistant found him in his office on day 19. Sir, I need your signature on the monthly household accounts. Adrian signed without looking. Marcus hesitated. There's also the matter of Ms. Rivera's severance and support payments. She's declined to cash the checks, all 3 of them. Adrian's pen froze. What? She returned them, with a note saying, and I quote, I neither want nor need anything from Mr. Blackwood. Something cold settled in Adrian's chest. Where is she living? I shouldn't say, sir. Marcus. The assistant sighed. A studio apartment in Queens, 400 square feet. She's working 2 jobs, waitressing during the day and night shifts at a 24-hour diner. Adrian's vision blurred. 2 jobs. Pregnant. Alone. Because of him. Get me the address. Sir, I don't think now. Daniel showed up unannounced on day 20. He took one look at Adrian, unshaven, still in yesterday's clothes, surrounded by empty whiskey glasses, and shook his head. Jesus, Adrian. You look like hell. Get out. No. Daniel dropped onto the couch. We're doing this. Right now. Doing what? The conversation where I tell you you're an idiot, and you finally admit what everyone else already knows. Adrian turned away. I'm not in the mood for, you're in love with her. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Don't lie to me. Daniel's voice was sharp. I've known you for 15 years. I've never seen you like this. Not over Victoria. Not over anyone. You're in love with Elena Rivera, and you're too much of a coward to do anything about it. It doesn't matter. Adrian's voice was hollow. I destroyed it. You didn't hear the things I said to her. The way He broke off. She'll never forgive me. Have you asked? What? Have you actually asked for her forgiveness? Or are you just sitting here wallowing in self-pity? Adrian stared at his oldest friend. She doesn't want to see me. She returned the money. Because she thinks you don't love her, you idiot. Daniel leaned forward. You told her the baby changes nothing. That you couldn't love her. What the hell did you expect? I was scared. The admission came out broken. My father. The way he destroyed everything he touched. What if I'm the same? What if I hurt her? Hurt the baby? So instead you pushed her away and hurt her anyway? Daniel's expression softened. Adrian, you're not your father. You never were. But if you don't fight for her, if you let fear win, then you lose everything that matters. The truth of it crashed over Adrian like a wave. I love her. He whispered. God, I love her. And I destroyed everything. Then fix it. How? She won't even cash my checks. Stop trying to fix it with money. Daniel stood. Go to her. Actually go to her. Tell her the truth. Beg if you have to. But stop hiding in this empty mansion pretending you don't care when we both know you're dying inside. Across the city, in a studio apartment with peeling paint and a radiator that barely worked, Elena Rivera sat on her second-hand futon and cried. 19 weeks pregnant now. The bump was visible, undeniable. She'd felt the baby move for the first time yesterday, a flutter like butterfly wings, and had no one to tell. Her feet ached from the double shift, her back screamed. The tips from the diner barely covered rent, let alone the doctor's bills that were piling up. But she meant what she said. She didn't want his money, didn't want anything that came with the reminder of what she'd lost. Don't expect love. The words still cut like glass. Elena placed a hand on her stomach, feeling the gentle swell where her baby, their baby, was growing. We'll be okay, she whispered into the darkness. Just us. I promise. We don't need him. But even as she said it, tears slipped down her cheeks. Because the truth, the unbearable, devastating truth, was that she did need him. Not his money, not his status, just him. His laugh, his rare smiles, the way he'd held her during the storm. The version of Adrian Blackwood that only she had ever seen. But that man was gone, and she had to learn to let go. Adrian stood at his window as dawn broke over the city. He hadn't slept, hadn't moved. Just stood there, Daniel's words echoing in his mind. Stop hiding. Fight for her. In his pocket, Elena's hairpin pressed against his palm. He'd spent his entire life building walls, controlling every variable, protecting himself from feeling anything that might destroy him the way his father's cruelty had. But Elena had slipped through every defense, had shown him what love could be, gentle, patient, real. And he'd thrown it away because he was terrified. No more. Adrian pulled out his phone, dialed his assistant. Marcus, clear my schedule for the next week. All of it, sir? And I need you to do something for me. Something important. He gave the instructions carefully, precisely. A plan was forming in his mind, one last chance to prove to Elena that he wasn't the man who'd pushed her away, that he could be the man she deserved. When the call ended, Adrian stared out at the city where Elena was somewhere, alone, carrying his child. I'm coming for you, he whispered, and I won't stop until you believe me. He made a decision then, one that would either win her back or lose her forever. But doing nothing was no longer an option, because living in this hollow mansion without her? That was the only thing he truly couldn't survive. The knock came at 7 in the morning. Elena startled awake on her futon, disoriented. Another knock, insistent but not aggressive. She pushed herself upright, one hand instinctively protective over her belly, now visibly rounded at 19 weeks. Who would visit at this hour? She shuffled to the door, still in her oversized sleep shirt and leggings, and looked through the peephole. Her heart stopped. Adrian Blackwood stood in her dingy hallway, looking nothing like the man she'd worked for. No tailored suit, no designer shoes, just worn jeans, a gray Henley, and an expression that looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. He looked broken, beautiful, terrifying. Elena's hand hovered over the doorknob. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away, to protect herself, to remember the words that had shattered her heart 3 weeks ago. Don't expect love. But something in his eyes through the peephole, desperation, hope, raw vulnerability, made her unlock the door. It opened 6 inches. The chain is still on. What are you doing here? Her voice was hoarse from sleep and tears she'd cried the night before. I need to talk to you. Please. We have nothing to. I was wrong. The words tumbled out of him. About everything. I was wrong, and I'm so sorry, and I know I don't deserve your time, but please, 5 minutes. Just give me 5 minutes. Elena hesitated. She should say no. She should slam the door and protect what was left of her heart. But the man standing in her hallway wasn't the cold billionaire who'd offered her money and nothing else. This man looked like he was barely holding himself together. Against every shred of self-preservation, Elena unlatched the chain and opened the door. Adrian stepped into the small apartment and felt his chest constrict. 400 square feet. Peeling wallpaper. A radiator that clanked and hissed. A futon that doubled as her bed. A hot plate on a card table serving as her kitchen. This was where she'd been living. Pregnant. Working 2 jobs. While he'd wallowed in his empty mansion. The guilt nearly drove him to his knees. Say what you came to say. Elena stood near the door, arms crossed over her chest. Defensive. Guarded. So different from the soft, open woman who'd held him during the storm. He'd done this. Broke her trust. Broken them. I was terrified, Adrian said quietly. That night when I found out the baby was mine, I panicked. My father," his voice cracked. "He was cruel, abusive. He turned love into a weapon and destroyed everyone who cared about him. I spent my whole life swearing I'd never become him." Elena's expression didn't change, but he saw her fingers tighten on her arms. "When you told me about the baby, all I could think was, what if I hurt you the same way? What if I hurt our child? What if I'm just like him and I destroy everything I touch?" He took a shaking breath. "So I pushed you away, said horrible things, because pushing you away felt safer than risking becoming a monster. So you hurt me instead." Her voice was small, wounded. "Yes." The word tore out of him. "I hurt you. The one person who saw past my walls, who made me feel human. I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me because I was a coward." Silence. Then, "Why are you here, Adrian?" "Because I can't breathe without you." The confession spilled out raw and honest. "Because every room in that penthouse is haunted by you. Because I found your hairpin under the couch, and it broke me. Because I love you, Elena. I am desperately, completely, terrifyingly in love with you." The air left her lungs. "I love the way you hum when you think no one's listening. I love your kindness to strangers. I love your strength, your laugh, the way you make empanadas for the doorman and bring light into dark spaces." His voice cracked. "I love our baby. A child I don't deserve but already love more than my own life." Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks. "You said it changed nothing," she whispered. "You said not to expect love." "I lied." Adrian dropped to his knees. Right there on her worn carpet, the most powerful man she'd ever known knelt before her. "I lied because I was scared. But losing you, living without you, that's worse than any fear. So I'm here begging. I don't deserve you. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I love you, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it if you'll let me." Elena stared down at him, tears streaming. "You hurt me. I know. I trusted you. That night, I gave you everything. And you forgot me. I remember now." His voice was thick. "Every moment. Your voice in the darkness. The way you held me. How you made me feel seen for the first time in my life. I remember, Elena. And I'm so sorry I made you feel invisible." She was crying openly now, her defenses crumbling brick by brick. "How do I know you won't run again? When things get hard? When does fatherhood terrify you?" "You don't." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small box. "But I'm asking you to take a chance on me anyway." Elena's eyes widened. "Adrian, it's not a ring." He opened the box. Inside was a single key on a simple chain. "It's a house. In Queens, near where you grew up. 3 bedrooms. A yard. A good school district." She stared at the key, uncomprehending. "I bought it 3 days ago," Adrian continued. "It's yours. No matter what you decide about me. No strings, no conditions. You and our baby will have a home. Security. You'll never struggle again, whether you choose me or not. Why would you? Because I love you. And love isn't about control. It's not transactional. It's just..." He looked up at her. Everything he felt laid bare in his eyes. "It's just wanting you to be happy. Even if that happiness doesn't include me." Elena's hands trembled as she reached down and cupped his face. "You really mean it?" she whispered. "This isn't about the baby. It's I fell in love with you long before I knew about the baby." His hands covered hers. "I fell in love with the woman who brings light into every room, who makes the world softer, who saw the broken parts of me and didn't run." "Adrian, I'm still terrified," he admitted, "of failing you, of failing our child. But I'm more terrified of living without you. So please, please give me a chance to be the man you deserve." Elena pulled him to his feet. For a long moment, they just stood there, her hands in his, the silence heavy with possibility. "I'm scared too," she finally said. "Of trusting you. Of believing this is real. Then be scared of me." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "We'll figure it out together. No contracts? No contracts. No conditions? Just us. However messy, however imperfect." Elena searched his eyes, and there, beneath the fear and the hope, she saw the truth. He loved her. This brilliant, broken, beautiful man loved her. I love you too, she whispered. Adrian made a sound like he'd been punched. Elena. She took his hand and placed it on her belly. Feel. For a moment, nothing. Then, a flutter. A tiny, impossible kick against his palm. Adrian's eyes went wide. Is that our baby? Elena smiled through her tears. Saying hello to Daddy? Something broke in Adrian's expression. Joy. Wonder. Relief so profound it looked like pain. His knees buckled, and he sank down, his forehead pressed against her belly, his shoulders shaking. He was weeping. This man who'd spent a lifetime hiding behind walls was on his knees in a tiny apartment, crying against the belly of the woman he loved, feeling their baby move for the first time. Elena's hands found his hair, gentle and forgiving. We'll be okay, she whispered. All three of us. And for the first time since that night in the library, Adrian Blackwood believed in something greater than fear. He believed in love. 6 months later the house smelled like fresh paint and possibility. Elena stood in the doorway of the nursery, one hand resting on her very pregnant belly, watching Adrian struggle with crib assembly instructions. He'd insisted on doing it himself. No hired help, no shortcuts, and the result was endearing chaos. The manual says tab A goes into slot B, she said, trying not to smile. Tab A is a lie. Adrian glared at the innocent piece of wood in his hand. There is no slot B. Maybe if I've got it. He looked up, saw her expression, and his frustration melted into a reluctant grin. Okay, I don't get it. Help me? Elena waddled over. There was no other word for it at 38 weeks, and pointed to the correct alignment. Together, they clicked the piece into place. There, Adrian said triumphantly. Teamwork, teamwork, she agreed, kissing his cheek. These moments had become their foundation. Small victories, shared struggles, learning to build a life together, one imperfect piece at a time. The past 6 months had been a revelation. Adrian had kept every promise. At every doctor's appointment, his hand is tied around hers during ultrasounds. Enrolled in parenting classes where he'd been the only man taking frantic notes. Spent weekends painting the nursery a soft lavender, Elena's favorite color, getting more paint on himself than the walls. And every night, without fail, he'd read to her belly. His deep voice was soft and reverent as he told their daughter stories about brave women and second chances. She's going to know she's loved, he'd said one night, his lips pressed to Elena's stomach. Before she even takes her first breath, she'll know. Elena had fallen in love with him all over again. This version of Adrian, nervous, imperfect, trying so hard, was more beautiful than the controlled billionaire had ever been. How are you feeling? He asked now, his hand replacing hers on her belly. Huge. Uncomfortable. Ready to meet her. Soon. He knelt and spoke directly to her stomach. But not too soon, baby girl. Daddy still hasn't figured out the changing table. Elena laughed, running her fingers through his hair. You're going to be an amazing father. He looked up at her, vulnerability still so close to the surface. You really think so? I know so. The contractions started at 3 in the morning. Elena woke to a tightening across her abdomen, uncomfortable but not yet painful. She lay still for a moment, processing, then felt it again. Adrian. She shook his shoulder gently. It's time. He bolted upright like he'd been electrocuted. Time? Time? Hospital time? Yes, but... He was already scrambling for clothes, tripping over his discarded jeans, looking adorably panicked. Adrian, breathe. I'm breathing. I'm totally breathing. He wasn't breathing. Where's the hospital bag? Did we pack the hospital bag? By the door, where we put it 3 weeks ago. Right. Okay. Okay. He stopped, came back to the bed, and cupped her face in his hands. Are you okay? I'm okay, she smiled. But we should probably go. Right. Going. We're going. Labor was brutal. 12 hours of contractions that felt like her body was tearing apart. 12 hours of breathing exercises and ice chips and Elena's hand crushing Adrian's until she was sure she'd broken bones. But he never left. Never complained. Just stayed beside her, whispering encouragement, wiping her forehead, and telling her she was the strongest person he'd ever known. "I can't," she sobbed during a particularly vicious contraction. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can." His voice was steady, anchoring her. "You're Elena Rivera. You survived poverty and loss and loved a broken man. You can do anything." "Broken?" She managed a weak laugh between contractions. "You're not broken. Not anymore." He pressed his lips to her knuckles. "You fixed me." Lily Aurora Blackwood entered the world at sunrise. One final push, and suddenly there was crying, high and indignant and perfect. The doctor lifted a squirming, red-faced bundle, and Elena's vision blurred with tears. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, though they'd known for months. But knowing and seeing were different things entirely. Adrian's hands were shaking as the doctor offered him surgical scissors. "Would you like to cut the cord?" He looked at Elena. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. With trembling hands, Adrian cut the umbilical cord, severing the physical connection between mother and daughter even as a new bond, family, wrapped around all three of them. They placed Lily on Elena's chest. She was tiny and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably be gray like her father's. "Hi, baby girl," Elena whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Adrian leaned down, his forehead against Elena's, one hand gently cradling their daughter's head. "Thank you," he breathed, "for everything. For her, for us, for not giving up on me. Never," Elena promised. The house was quiet when they brought Lily home 3 days later. Elena settled into the rocking chair in the nursery, the one Adrian had obsessively researched for optimal back support, and began to nurse. Lily latched immediately, her tiny hand curling against Elena's chest. Adrian stood in the doorway, just watching, memorizing this moment. His family, his home, the life he never thought he deserved. "Are you going to stand there all night?" Elena asked softly. "Maybe." He crossed the room and settled behind her, his arms wrapping around both of them. His chin rested on Elena's shoulder. "I'm afraid if I blink, I'll wake up and this will all be a dream. It's real." She leaned back against him. "We're real." Lily made a small, contented sound. Adrian's hand covered hers where it rested on their daughter's back. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you too," Elena replied. Lily stirred, her eyes fluttering open for a moment, those dark newborn eyes that seemed to see everything. "We both do," Elena added, looking down at their daughter with wonder. Dawn crept through the nursery windows, turning the white walls honey gold. They stayed exactly like that, tangled together, breathing in sync, learning what it felt like to be whole. A small family in a modest house in Queens. Nothing like the empire Adrian had built. Nothing like the life he'd planned. It was better. Outside, the city was waking up. But inside, in this quiet moment, time seemed to stand still. Adrian Blackwood, once cold, once heartless, once convinced he was incapable of love, held his entire world in his arms and finally understood. Love had been there all along, waiting in the soft voice of a woman who'd seen past his walls, growing in the gentle curve of her belly, born in the cry of their daughter at sunrise. He'd spent his life building towers of glass and steel, thinking that was strength. But this, Elena's warmth against his chest, Lily's tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb, the peaceful quiet of a Sunday morning in their home, this was everything. "What are you thinking?" Elena asked, her voice sleepy and content. Adrian pressed a kiss to her temple. "That I'm the luckiest man alive." "Good answer. And that our daughter is going to be brilliant and strong, just like her mother. She'll have your determination, and your kindness." Elena smiled. "She'll have both our stubbornness. God help us." Adrian laughed, a real laugh, the kind that came from joy rather than politeness. Lily yawned, milk-drunk and peaceful, already falling asleep in her mother's arms. "Welcome to the world, Lily Aurora," Adrian whispered. "We promise to love you, to protect you, and to show you that family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Elena turned her head, catching his lips in a gentle kiss. "We're going to be okay, aren't we? Better than okay." His arms tightened around them both. "We're going to be happy." And in that quiet moment, As dawn light filled their home and their daughter slept peacefully between them, the heartless billionaire finally understood. Love had been there all along, waiting in the eyes of his maid, his partner, his forever. And that's where our story ends. But your journey doesn't have to. If this story touched your heart, if you believed in Elena and Adrian's love, please take a moment to subscribe. There are so many more stories waiting for you. Tales of second chances, forbidden love, and hearts that refuse to give up. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing in love, even when it feels impossible. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep hoping, and remember, love always finds a way. This has been The Heartless Billionaire and the Pregnant Maid, brought to you by Soul Written.